162. That's the amount of games each team plays during the course of a Major League Baseball regular season. And that, of course, doesn't include spring training games. That doesn't include the postseason if they make it there. The Major League Baseball season just has so many games. Now compare that to the NFL, where these teams play a 17-game schedule over the course of 18 weeks, and it all concludes with a single elimination playoff bracket. Every individual game holds so much more weight in the NFL schedule just because of the lower amount of games on the schedule. There is not a lot of room for error in the NFL season. So I started to think, what would Major League Baseball look like with a schedule like this? Well, today we're going to find out, because I have crafted an 18-week MLB schedule where each team plays 17 games with one bye week, and they will only get to face their divisional opponents twice during the regular season, once on the road and once at home. I got to give a big shout out to Dean's World. I've seen him do this video giving NFL a baseball season or a basketball season. I thought this would be a really fun idea for MLB, so major shout out to him for the inspiration for this video. So let's get this started by talking about how this is all set up. First things first, the NFL is a little bit different than the MLB in its structure, as the NFL consists of 32 teams split across two conferences, the AFC and the NFC, and each conference features 4 divisions. The MLB, however, only features 30 teams, and those 30 teams are divided into 2 leagues. You have the American League and National League, and there's 3 divisions in each league. Now, for the sake of not making things too confusing, I'm just going to leave the MLB divisions as they are, which just means that when we get to the playoffs, instead of 4 division winners and 3 wild cards, there's going to be 3 divisional winners and 4 wild cards. Another thing to point out here is that during the course of a 162-game season, MLB teams have a pitching rotation consisting of 4 or 5 starting pitchers, and that means each starter usually gets the ball every 5 or 6 days. Well, on an NFL-like schedule where you're only playing once a week, you don't really need a pitching rotation. So every team can basically throw their ace every single game. But now we can get this season started as we head into a couple marquee divisional matchups on opening day, starting with an NL East matchup between the Phillies and the Mets in Citi Field. And the new Mets ace, Freddie Peralta, is on the mound. He would find himself in trouble early as the Phillies had bases loaded in the first inning, but he struck out Adolis Garcia to escape the jam. And in the bottom of the first, another new face for the Mets would cash in the first runs of the game. Jorge Polanco hit a tank to the 3rd deck. The Phillies would keep battling and actually knocked Freddie Peralta out of this game in the 5th, but Kodai Senga came in and shut things down. The Phillies would have one more decent opportunity to score in the 8th inning, but they could not come through. And ultimately, Devin Williams came in, got the save, and the Mets get a huge victory at home on opening day. The other marquee matchup for opening day has the San Diego Padres heading up to Chavez Ravine to take on the Dodgers. And the Padres wasted no time getting after Yamamoto as they put up a 3 spot in the first inning thanks to a Fernando Tatis Jr. homer. Fernando would cash in another run on a base hit down the line later in the game, and the Padres took a 5-0 lead into the 9th inning. The Dodgers would threaten a little bit as Kyle Tucker got his first RBI as a member of LA, but after that, Mason Miller came into the game. He secured the final out, and the San Diego Padres get a huge road victory to start the season. Hey, the MLB NFL season is off to a pretty hot start. I'm gonna go ahead and simulate some games, and I'll see you in a few weeks. As I simulate through some of these games, I just want to give you guys a reminder that Underdog is gonna have a lot of fun promos for the big game coming up. These are my picks for the Super Bowl, so feel free to tail them, feel free to make your own picks, but either way, just make sure that when you sign up on Underdog, you're using code COOGS, because when you do, not only do you get a free pick that you can add to your first entry, you'll also get $75 in fantasy bonus entries after you play your first $5. And if you just play $5, that $75 bonus from Underdog is basically 15 entries on them. So give Underdog a shot, sign up with code COOGS, and please always play responsibly. All right, so I went ahead and simulated 6 weeks into the season. Let's do a standings check for every division. By the way, I am keeping stats after every game, and I'm manually inputting all of these. So if you guys are you're enjoying, please drop a thumbs up because this video has turned into a lot more work than I thought it would be. Starting in the AL East, the New York Yankees are off to a perfect 6-0 start, and a large part of that is due to a couple players. Cody Bellinger has emerged as an early AL MVP candidate as he's racked up 3 home runs and 8 RBIs through the first 6 games, giving him a slugging percentage at 1,000 while being tied for the MLB lead in hits at 11. The other reason the Yankees are playing so well is because of Max Fried. In 6 starts, he has a 1.8 ERA with 38 strikeouts through 45 innings with a whip at .711. He's definitely an early AL Cy Young candidate. But right behind the Yankees in the division is the Toronto Blue Jays. They've been getting some good production out of a couple bats like Vlad Jr., of course, but also their new addition Kazuma Okamoto, as he has 8 hits and 23 at-bats with 2 homers and 2 doubles, giving him an OPS over 1,000. Moving over to the AL Central, everything is pretty close here. It's a 3-way tie at the top of the division with the Twins, Tigers, and Guardians, but the White Sox and Royals are each just 1 game back. Still a lot that needs to happen in the AL Central before we have any indication of where things are going. One thing to point out, though, is Jose Ramirez is off to an extremely slow start with only 2 hits in 23 at-bats, giving him an average at .087. He's definitely going to have to step it up if the Guardians want any chance. Now, moving over to the AL West, we have a bit of a surprise here. The Angels are in first place after the first 6 weeks with a 4-1 record. They've already had their bye week. The top of the Angels lineup is hitting really well. Neto, Shanuel, and Trout are all doing their thing, but Yusei Kikuchi has been a dog. 5 starts with a 2.88 ERA, and he's striking out almost 12 batters per 9. Please let that translate to real life. The Mariners are only 1 game behind, and Cal Raleigh has not hit his stride yet. Only 1 homer through the first 6 games. And the Houston Astros are only half a game behind them, and one of the big reasons there is Jeremy Pena is also an early AL MVP candidate, as through 24 at-bats, he has 10 hits, 1 double, 2 triples, 2 homers, and an OPS at 1.434. Now let's move to the National League East, and I'm sorry to say the Nationals are off to a terrible start, 0-6. Even in an 18-week schedule, it doesn't look like they're going to stand much of a chance. However, at the top of the division, we have the New York Mets and Atlanta Braves. Both of those teams are being led by early NL MVP candidates Ronald Acuna Jr. for the Braves. He's leading all of baseball with 9 runs batted in through the first 6 games. And for the New York Mets, Juan Soto has been going crazy. 5 homers through the first 6 games. That leads all of baseball, and he has an OPS at 1.464. Now, heading to the NL Central at the top of the division, we have 2 teams tied, not just for the division lead, but for the best record in the NL, that being the Brewers and the Cubs. The Brewers are doing their thing, getting timely hits when they need it, but what's really carried them is their pitching. Brandon Woodruff is a 2.43 ERA through 6 games, and their bullpen has only allowed 1 run so far. The Cubs have also been carried by strong starting pitching, as Shota Imanaga has a 2.61 ERA, but they're also getting some really good production offensively from guys like Nico Horner. He has 5 doubles and 7 runs batted in through the first 6 games, giving him a slugging at 810. And lastly, we have the NL West. The Dodgers have bounced back from their bad start against the Padres. They've now won 4 of the last 5 games, getting them back to the top of the division. Tommy Edman has kind of been their MVP, as he has 3 homers and 8 RBIs in 20 at-bats, but the Dodgers are only 1 game ahead of the next 3 teams, the Padres, Giants, and Rockies, and only 1.5 games above the Diamondbacks. So that's a good idea about where everybody stands after the first 6 weeks of the season. I'm going to go ahead and start getting through some more games now. I do want to mention that in the NFL, I believe the trade deadline was after week 9. I will not be having any trades in this because I'm technically controlling all the teams. Nobody's going to be moving around. It's the opening day rosters from week 1 to week 18. I'll see you guys after week 12. So we're now officially 12 weeks into the season, and we have some interesting developments in some of the divisional standings. In the AL East, the Yankees are still in first place, but they've actually lost 3 out of their last 5 games, and the Baltimore Orioles are right there, only 1 game behind. In the American League Central, the Minnesota Twins have won 5 consecutive games, giving them a 2-game lead in the division over the second-place Kansas City Royals. And in the AL West, things are getting wild. There's a 3-way tie for first place between the Mariners, the Rangers, and the Angels. However, the A's and the Astros are each only 1.5 games back. Even though they're not in first place, I do want to highlight Lawrence Butler of the A's, as he's putting together a really strong season, hitting .366 with a .426 on base, an OPS at 1109 with 4 doubles, 3 homers, and 9 RBIs. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on, as he could maybe be a difference maker for the A's in this last third of the season. Moving on now to the NL East, we have the New York Mets in first place with not just the best record in the National League, but the best record in all of baseball at 9-2. Juan Soto is still playing extremely well, but Francisco Lindor has caught fire recently, as he's tallied 7 extra base hits in these first 11 games, giving him an OPS over 1,000. The Braves and Phillies are both tied for second in this division. The Braves are still getting MVP caliber play out of Ronald Acuna Jr., but also guys like Austin Riley have started to step up. He's tallied 11 RBIs through 11 games and has a slugging percentage over 700. And for the Phillies, they're getting MVP caliber play from their superstar Bryce Harper, as he has a .435 on base percentage through 11 games with 9 walks and 11 hits. Moving over to the NL Central, we have a pretty fun race at the top of this division between the Brewers and the Cubs. The Cubs find themselves just half a game back of the Brewers, but this division definitely has the potential to come down to the wire. And over in the NL West, we have an interesting development. The Colorado Rockies find themselves in sole possession of first place. Definitely a fun thing to see. However, the Giants, Padres, and Dodgers are all just 1 game back each. Now, as we head into the final stretch of this season, I'm going to slow things down. We're going to start going week by week, because pretty soon teams are going to be able to start clinching divisions as well as wild card spots. And remember, there's going to be 4 wild card teams for this bracket, so we got to keep an eye on all of these divisional and wild card races. Let's go. So here in week 13, we have some very interesting results. The New York Yankees lost to the Atlanta Braves, while the Baltimore Orioles beat the New York Mets, which means the Yankees and Orioles are now tied for first place in the AL East. And we can't sleep on Toronto, as they beat the Mariners, which means the Blue Jays are just 1 game behind the Yankees and Orioles. Now, that Mariners loss has implications on the AL West, as the Angels also took a loss to the Giants, while the Texas Rangers put the beatdown on the Kansas City Royals in a 10-0 victory, which means the Texas Rangers now have sole possession of first place. As far as the NL Central, both the Brewers and the Cubs would get a win, and the Cubs win came against the Colorado Rockies, and the Dodgers absolutely killed the Pirates, so now there's a 3-way tie in the NL West. The wild card races are all over the place right now. There's a bunch of tiebreakers I haven't even implemented yet, so let's move on to week 14 for now. We have even more divisional movement here in week 14. The Dodgers picked up a 1-0 win against the Boston Red Sox. Meanwhile, the Giants and the Rockies both took L's, so the inevitable has happened. The Dodgers have first place in the NL West. In the NL Central, the Milwaukee Brewers won their game, but this was the Cubs' bye week, so the Brewers just pick up a half game to put themselves a full game up in the division. Nothing really changed in the NL East, as the Mets and the Braves both won their games. The Seattle Mariners beat the Guardians, but the Texas Rangers took a win on the road against the Toronto Blue Jays, so the Rangers still hold on to first place in the West. And that loss for the Blue Jays is a big missed opportunity, because the Yankees took yet another L, but the Orioles also lost. All 3 teams at the top of the division could not capitalize on an opportunity this week. And we got to stop sleeping on the Tampa Bay Rays. They won another game, and they're now tied with the Blue Jays, and they're only 1 game back of the division lead. The AL East is kind of crazy. One last thing to mention, the Twins won another game this week, and that actually propels them into the 1 seed in the AL as of right now. Let's head to week 15. Week 15 was a good one. The New York Mets picked up a win against the Houston Astros, and the Atlanta Braves lost to the Tigers. So that gives the Mets a 3-game division lead with only 3 games to play, but they have not technically clinched the division yet, as there's still some tiebreaker stuff that needs to happen. And it's a similar story over in the AL Central, as the Twins got another win, but just like the Mets, they're also up by 3 games with 3 games to play, but they have not secured the division yet due to tiebreakers. In one of the biggest matchups of the week, the Cubs would go into LA and beat the Dodgers on the road. Meanwhile, up in Seattle, the Colorado Rockies would get a road win. So a Dodgers loss and a Rockies win has the NL West back in a stalemate at the top of the division. And the Rockies and Dodgers are 1-1 on the season series, so there's a chance this one comes down to an even deeper tiebreaker. The chaos in the AL East continued. The Orioles picked up a win over the Phillies, and the Yankees lost again. They've lost 6 out of their last 8. They started the year 6-0. Meanwhile, the Tampa Bay Rays picked up another win. They beat the Giants. So now in the AL East, the Orioles are in first place with the Yankees and Rays tied for second. The Yankees do hold the tiebreaker over the Rays. They've beat them twice this year already. And with their win over the Yankees and the Mariners' loss to the Rockies, the Texas Rangers now have a 2-game lead in the AL West. Dude, this is getting crazy. We still have 3 more weeks to go. Let's keep it moving. And now in week 16, we have our first division champion. The New York Mets beat the Washington Nationals. That win secures their NL East title. Meanwhile, the Braves and the Phillies played against each other, and the Phillies won, which now sees both of these teams tied with an 8-7 record. We'll see what happens with them in the wildcard race. As always, it was another crazy week in the AL East, as the New York Yankees finally got a good victory, but we also had a Tampa Bay and Baltimore matchup, and Tampa Bay came out on top, which means we now have a 3-way tie for first place in the AL East. The Rays hold the tiebreaker over the Orioles, but the Yankees hold the tiebreaker over them both. In the NL West, the Rockies got a win at home over the Angels, and the Dodgers went up to San Francisco and lost, which means the Rockies are now back in first place in the NL West, and the Dodgers, Padres, and Giants are all tied at 8-7. Bro, I really hope the Rockies pull this off. In the AL West, the Mariners beat the Astros, and the Rangers lost to the A's, which means the Rangers now only have a 1-game lead over both the Mariners and the A's. The A's are kind of like Tampa. They've been kind of sneaky this year. They're right there in the mix. In the NL Central, the Brewers got another win, as well as the Cubs, so that division remains separated by 1 game at the top. Meanwhile, the Royals and the Tigers would both pick up a game on the Twins, but the Twins are still in a spot where all they have to do is win 1 game to clinch that division. So now let's head to week 17. Well, here in week 17, more playoff spots have been secured. The Texas Rangers went up to Seattle and beat the Mariners 5-1, and that win secures a division championship for the Rangers. The Minnesota Twins also beat the Kansas City Royals, and that win gives them the AL Central title. The AL East is still up for grabs though, as the Baltimore Orioles beat the Boston Red Sox, the Rays beat the Blue Jays, and the Yankees beat the Dodgers. All 3 teams won in week 17, so there is still a 3-way tie at the top of this division, but all 3 teams have secured at least a playoff berth. Now, that Dodgers loss to the Yankees has big implications for the NL West, as the Giants beat up on the Padres, but the Rockies lost to the last place Diamondbacks. That means we have a tie for first place between San Francisco and Colorado, with the Dodgers and Padres both 1 game out. The NL West is coming down to the wire. There was also a really big matchup this week between the Brewers and the Mets, both teams who are fighting for the 1 seed in the National League, and the Brewers ended up getting that victory at home, setting them up as the 1 seed for now. However, the Chicago Cubs won their game this week as well, which means the NL Central is still separated by 1 game at the top, and with just 1 game left to play, the Brewers have still not clinched, as the Cubs technically hold the tiebreaker between the 2 of them. They split the season series, but the Cubs have a better record within the division. So there is still a ton of stuff up in the air for week 18. This turned out exactly the way I hoped. We have so many playoff berths still to be determined, with 1 week of baseball left before the playoffs. So much chaos here in the National League for the final spots. It's the same in the American League. Let's see how it all turns out in week 18. So week 18 saw a few teams play spoiler, as the Chicago White Sox would beat the Chicago Cubs, which ended the Cubs' dream of winning the NL Central. And to make it even worse for them, the Brewers lost. If the Cubs would have just beat the last place White Sox, they would have won the NL Central, but they couldn't do it. So the Brewers, even with a loss, secure the NL Central and the 1 seed in the National League. The Brewers' loss was actually pretty notable too, because they lost to the Minnesota Twins. And with that win, the Minnesota Twins secured the 1 seed in the American League. But now we gotta figure out this AL East. I said teams were able to play spoiler this week, and that's exactly what the Miami Marlins did to the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays lost to the Marlins and lost their chance at winning the division. However, the Baltimore Orioles would take care of business. They beat the Nationals, but ultimately none of that mattered because the New York Yankees beat the New York Mets. And as we know, the Yankees had the tiebreaker over the other 2 teams in the AL East, which means the Yankees officially clinched the division. And that pretty much leaves just the NL West as the final division champion to be decided. The San Francisco Giants handled business and beat the Athletics, but unfortunately, the Colorado Rockies could not beat the Astros in Week 18, which means the San Francisco Giants are the NL West champions. Now, once we had all the division winners set, I started looking at all the wild card stuff, and I took about 45 minutes to an hour to truly figure out all of the different moving pieces and figure out all of these tiebreakers for all of these teams. And based off the NFL's tiebreaker rules, the Seattle Mariners take that last wild card spot. And in the National League, there were 4 teams fighting for the last 3 spots, all with a 9-8 record. And unfortunately for the Padres, with the same criteria, they were the odd man out. The Dodgers, Rockies, and Braves all get wild card spots. So there it is, man, an 18-week season, 17 games, and these are the final seedings for both leagues. This playoff bracket is going to be a lot of fun, but first, we got to send out some awards. The NL MVP belongs to Fernando Tatis Jr. He finished the season with 9 homers, 3 doubles, 21 RBIs, giving him a .344 average with a .458 on base and an .836 slugging percentage. Look, I know the Padres missed out on the playoffs, and usually in the NFL, the MVP is on a playoff team, but dude, he slugged over 800, man. It's gotta be Fernando. And in the American League, the MVP belongs to Cody Bellinger. I talked about him earlier in the video after the first 6 weeks. He continued his dominance through the entire 17-game season, finishing with 7 homers, 7 doubles, a .423 on base, and a 1.165 OPS. Bellinger is your AL MVP. For Cy Young in the American League, it belongs to Joe Ryan, as he put up a 2.41 ERA through 17 games. He struck out 151 batters, giving him a K per 9 at just under 12. His whip was under .9. Joe Ryan was the ace of the American League and the ace for the 1 seed Minnesota Twins. And the National League Cy Young belongs to Chris Sale of the Braves. He finished the season with a 2.28 ERA in 116 innings. He struck out 162 batters, had a K per 9 at 12.6. He was a huge reason why the Braves were able to make the postseason. So the postseason bracket is officially set. We have all of our matchups ready to go. I will do some reseeding to make sure the 1 seed in each league will play the lowest seed in the divisional round. But for now, let's start with our matchup between the Orioles and the Rays. So the Tampa Bay Rays would start this game with a leadoff double, but they would not be able to bring that runner home. And in the bottom of the second, the Orioles would strike first off a Tyler O'Neill sac fly RBI. The Rays would leave another guy in scoring position in the 4th inning, as well as another one in the 5th inning. But finally in the 6th inning, thanks to an RBI triple from Yandy Diaz and an RBI ground out from Jonathan Aranda, the Rays had the lead. But in the bottom of the 8th, Pete Alonso stepped up and hit a massive 2-run home run. And with 2 outs in the 9th, Ryan Helsley shut the door on the Rays, and the Orioles win this wild card matchup. We'll go ahead and stick to the American League side here, as our next matchup is the Tigers heading up to New York to face the Yankees. And this game would start very similar to the last one, as the Tigers leave a guy on 3rd base in the top of the 1st. However, in the 4th inning, the Tigers would threaten again. They had 2 guys on for Matt Vierling. He hit into what looked like was going to be a double play, but a bad throw costed the Yankees the out, but they survived as Dingler popped up for the 3rd out. The Tigers would miss another chance to score in the 5th inning as Kerry Carpenter struck out with a runner on 2nd. And in the bottom of the 5th inning, the Yankees would get on the board with a Jazz Chisholm RBI double to left field. And that 1-0 lead would remain going into the top of the 9th inning, as Spencer Torkelson leaded off the inning with a single but Perez struck out, Bierling struck out, and in a bizarre decision to run, Spencer Torkelson was thrown out at second base for the final out of the game. The Yankees beat the Tigers, and they're moving on to the divisional round. That leaves our final matchup in the AL wildcard round between the Rangers and the Mariners. Now, if you enjoy missed chances to score, this is the game for you, because the Mariners missed a chance in the first inning, they missed a chance in the fourth inning, they missed another chance in the sixth inning, and in the bottom of the sixth, the Rangers would finally score on an Evan Carter homer, but the Mariners weren't done. They missed another chance in the seventh inning. They said, oh, we can keep going. How about we miss another shot in the eighth inning? And finally, in the ninth inning, they led things off with a double, but then Young struck out, Arozarena struck out, and finally, their star, Cal Raleigh, also struck out. The Mariners had every chance to beat the Rangers, but they could not get one clutch hit. The Rangers move on to the divisional round. Now we'll move to the National League, and we'll see this matchup between the Cubs and the Braves. This was honestly a pretty quiet game as two really good pitchers went at it. There really wasn't any action until the fifth inning when the Braves had 2 on, 2 out for Ronald Acuna Jr., but Shota Imanaga was able to strike him out on a high fastball. In the bottom of the sixth, the Cubs would have a chance against Chris Sale, but Ian Happ would not be able to cash in that runner on second base. And dude, these two pitching staffs were dealing. This game was scoreless going into the ninth inning. The Braves got a base runner but couldn't bring him in. And in the bottom of the ninth, Ian Happ hit a solo home run. Gotta love when absolutely no action happens when you're watching, only when you're simulating. Either way, the Cubs walk off the Braves, and they will be moving on to the next round. Next, we're gonna head to San Francisco to see this NL West matchup between the Giants and the Rockies. And the Giants would get this one started early, as in the bottom of the second inning with 2 guys on, Casey Schmidt tripled to drive both of those runners in, and that was followed by a sac fly from Encarnacion to drive in Schmidt, which put the Giants up 3-0. However, this Rockies team was ready to fight. Ezequiel Tovar ended up hitting a 2-run double to cut the lead down to 1. Unfortunately for the Rockies, the Giants were just going to keep going as Jung-Hoo Lee led off the third inning with a home run. And later in the inning, Heliot Ramos hit a 2-run home run. The Giants scored even more in the fourth. And in the eighth inning, the Rockies had a chance to maybe make a comeback, but Willie Castro could not come through. And with 2 outs in the ninth inning, Ezequiel Tovar flied out to left field, which means the Giants beat the Rockies and thus ends the Rockies' miracle season. And now we head to our final wildcard matchup. It's the Mets taking on the Dodgers. The Mets would strike first on an RBI double from Marcus Semien, and in the bottom of the third, Francisco Lindor would add on with a 2-run home run sent to the upper deck off Yamamoto. And later in the inning, Bo Bichette hit an RBI single to center, which set the Mets up with a 4-0 lead. Now, the Dodgers, of course, were not going to go down easy as Tommy Edman hit a 2-run home run in the fifth, but the Mets answered right back with a Bo Bichette home run in the bottom of the inning. Things would start to get wild in the seventh inning on. With 2 outs in the seventh, Mookie Betts hit an RBI double. Freddie Freeman would then walk, but then Kyle Tucker struck out to end the inning. Now, in the eighth inning, the Dodgers threatened again. As they had 2 on with 2 outs, the Mets had to call on Devin Williams to come in for a 4-out save, and he would get Tommy Edman to strike out, ending the inning. And Devin Williams was feeling really good as Marcus Semien hit a home run in the bottom of the eighth. That gave the Mets some insurance, but it wouldn't last for long as Mookie Betts hit another RBI double to get that run right back in the top of the ninth, and now Devin Williams had to deal with a runner on second. He did get Freddie Freeman to pop up. He did get Kyle Tucker to ground out, but with 2 outs in the ninth, the Mets decided to go to Kodai Senga to try to close this game out, and right away, he allowed a base hit to Will Smith to make it just a 1-run game, and that brought up Max Muncy, one of the most dangerous hitters in Dodgers postseason history. But Kodai Senga won this battle. He struck out Muncy, and the Mets survived a thriller, knocking off the Dodgers and moving on to the next round. So our divisional round matchups are officially set, and the higher seed won in every single game in the wild card round. So we legitimately have the top 4 seeds in each league. Let's head to Minnesota to see the Twins versus the Orioles. Now, this one was absolutely wild. In the second inning, the Baltimore Orioles got a couple runs on Jackson Holliday's ground rule double that barely stayed fair, and they would actually load the bases, but Gunnar Henderson struck out to end the rally and the inning. Now, the Twins would answer back in the bottom of the inning as Byron Buxton hit an RBI single up the middle. And in the bottom of the third, the Twins had another rally going, and Victor Caratini cashed in 2 runs, which gave the Twins the lead. In the fourth inning, the Orioles had a couple guys on base, but Jordan Westburg struck out for out number 3. But that didn't stop the Orioles as Adley Rutschman hit a 2-run home run in the next inning to put Baltimore back on top. The Orioles would carry this momentum later into the game. In the 7th inning, Pete Alonso hit a massive 2-run home run, and this score would remain heading into the bottom of the 9th, and with 2 outs, the Minnesota Twins had a chance to tie the game with 1 swing. Trevor Larnach hit a ball to second base. Jackson Holliday bobbled it, but he recovered and still made the out. The Baltimore Orioles came into Minnesota and knocked off the 1-seed Twins. Baltimore is going to the American League Championship game. But now we gotta find out who their opponent will be, which means we have to go to Texas to see the Yankees versus the Rangers. The Rangers got on the board first with a Jake Berger sac fly to left field, but after that, it was all Yankees. In the 4th inning, Giancarlo Stanton hit a towering 2-run home run to left field. In the 5th inning, their 9-hitter Austin Wells went yard, and then 3 batters later, the MVP Cody Bellinger drove in another run on a base hit to left. In the 7th inning, Trent Grisham homered to center field, and the Rangers really just did not have an offensive answer in this game. And with 2 outs in the 9th inning, David Bednar struck out Kyle Higashioka, and the Yankees come into Texas, they get the win, and they get to move on to the AL Championship game to play the Baltimore Orioles. So now let's get these National League divisional games going. First up, we have the Brewers and the Cubs. Dude, these 2 teams were battling all year in the standings in the Central Division. We knew we would see these 2 teams face off. And in the bottom of the 2nd, the Brewers were ready to strike first, but Nico Horner made an amazing play at second base to end this inning. That dive saved a run. The Brewers would have another opportunity later in the game, and this time they were not going to be denied as Bryce Terang ripped a double to right field to score 2 runs. That put the Brewers on top. However, the Cubs were ready to answer right back as Michael Busch grounded to center for an RBI single, and this rally had a chance to continue. Bregman put a really good swing on a ball to right field, but it found the glove of Sal Frelick. But then Ian Happ struck out on a high fastball, and after that, the Brewers scored again on a Caleb Durbin solo home run. And for the rest of the game, the Cubs were just not able to get anything going. With 2 outs in the 9th, it came down to Pete Crow Armstrong, and he grounded out to second base. The Brewers survived against the Cubs in the regular season in the divisional standings, and now they knock them out in the postseason. The Brewers are heading to the NL Championship game, and their opponent will be the winner of this matchup between the San Francisco Giants and New York Mets. And in this one, the Mets wasted no time getting on the board as Juan Soto hit a 2-run home run in the bottom of the 1st. Later in the inning, Brett Beatty singled to center field, and that drove in Bo Bichette. The Mets came out of the gate hot, but the Giants weren't going to just roll over as Casey Schmidt hit a home run in the top of the 2nd. The Giants did have a chance to put up some more runs in the 3rd, but with 2 on and 2 out, Matt Chapman grounded out to Lindor. However, they would bounce back as Gerard Encarnacion hit a home run in the 4th inning to make it a 3-2 ball game. But then in the bottom of that same inning, Tyrone Taylor doubled the left field to score Luis Robert. And this 4-2 Mets lead would last all the way to the 9th inning as Devin Williams came in for the save. Matt Chapman got the inning started with a single, but then Heliot Ramos swung at ball 4 and popped up. Casey Schmidt struck out on a fastball, and then Encarnacion ripped a line drive to left field, but it found the glove of Tyrone Taylor, which means the New York Mets win at home against the San Francisco Giants, and they will be heading to Milwaukee for the National League Championship game. So our championship matchups are set. We have an AL East matchup between the Orioles and the Yankees, and we have a matchup of the top 2 seeds in the National League, the Brewers and the Mets. It's time to find out who's going to the MLB Championship game. It feels weird not calling it the World Series, but it's not a series. But it also doesn't make sense to call it like the World Super Bowl, the World Bowl. MLB Championship works today, all right? So we're going to start in the Bronx with the Yankees and the Orioles. And Baltimore would get the scoring started early with an Adley Rutschman solo shot in the top of the second, but Ryan McMahon answered right back in the bottom of the inning to tie the game. And then things were a little bit quiet up until the bottom of the fifth, as the Yankees had 2 on and only 1 out, but they could not come through as Austin Wells struck out on a slider and Trent Grisham grounded out to second, which kept us tied at 1 after 5. That tie would not last for long, as in the bottom of the 6th, Aaron Judge hit a home run to take the lead, and things would start to snowball in the bottom of the 7th as Austin Wells hit a 2-run home run, and later in the inning, big Giancarlo Stanton stepped up and hit a 3-run bomb to left center field, putting the Yankees ahead 7-1, and that was all they needed, as in the 9th inning, Fernando Cruz got Adley Rutschman to strike out for the 3rd out, which means the New York Yankees are officially heading to the MLB championship game. So now let's move over to the Brewers and the Mets, the top 2 seeds in the National League. The Mets were ready to get things going in the top of the 1st, but Jorge Polanco hit a ball on the ground, and the Brewers were able to turn a really close double play to get out of the inning. But the Mets were right back after it in the 2nd, as this time they had the bases loaded for Luis Robert, and he would beat out the ball he hit on the ground, and the Mets would score their first run, but they would add another in the next at-bat as Tyrone Taylor hit a ball to center field that scored Brett Beatty, and then later in the inning, Juan Soto beat a ball out at first base that scored Francisco Lindor. So the New York Mets had a 3-0 lead after 2. And this game would be pretty quiet throughout these middle innings, but in the 6th inning, the Mets once again were ready to put a run across as Tyrone Taylor got another RBI single to center field. Tyrone Taylor continues to haunt his former club. And speaking of former clubs, Freddie Peralta for the Mets was absolutely dealing in this one, as the Brewers really had no answer for any of his pitches. It took until the 8th inning for the Brewers to do anything against Freddie Peralta, as Caleb Durbin got an RBI triple that bounced Peralta from the game, and Jake Bauers would end up driving that run in via a sac fly. But with this 2-run lead, the Mets would call on another former Brewer, Devin Williams, to get the final 3 outs. Jackson Chourio would fly out to Juan Soto. Bryce Terang struck out on a fastball literally down the middle, and William Contreras could not catch up to the heat. The New York Mets, aided by former members of the Brewers, are able to get the win. They are the NL champions, which means we have a matchup between the Yankees and the Mets in the MLB championship. It's a subway game for the title, although it's not technically a subway game for this one, because the Super Bowl every year is played at a neutral site, and since this year's Super Bowl is played in Santa Clara, the home of the San Francisco 49ers, this MLB championship will be played at Oracle Park. So here we go, man. The New York Yankees, led by their superstar Aaron Judge, their MVP Cody Bellinger, their ace Max Fried, going up against the 3-headed monster at the top of the Mets lineup, Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, and Bo Bichette, with Freddie Peralta on the mound. It's a battle for New York in San Francisco for the MLB title. The action in this game would start early as Bo Bichette stepped up with runners on the corners, and he lined a single to left field to score Francisco Lindor, but this rally would quickly end after a Jorge Polanco double play and a Marcus Semien strikeout. The Yankees found themselves in a good scoring opportunity in the top of the 3rd as Cody Bellinger stepped up with 2 guys on, but he just missed this pitch and he flies out to center field to end the inning. Now in the bottom of the 3rd, Jorge Polanco came up with a few guys on, and he hit the ball decently well to left field, but it found the glove of Cody Bellinger, so the Mets' 1-0 lead held after 3 innings. The Yankees had another chance in the 4th inning with runners on the corners, but Jose Caballero could not hold up on his swing. Freddie Peralta gets the strikeout to keep the Yankees scoreless. In the bottom of the inning, the New York Mets had another 1st and 3rd opportunity, and Francisco Alvarez would drive in that runner from 3rd on a sac fly, and the next hitter, Luis Robert, would hit a double to center field to score Brett Beatty. However, the Yankees would finally get on the board when Aaron Judge got an RBI double in the 5th, and the MVP Cody Bellinger followed that up with another RBI double to right field. But then something bizarre happened. In the bottom of the 5th, with a runner on 3rd, Bo Bichette hits the ball to first base, and it bounces off the bag and gets by Ben Rice. That allows Francisco Lindor to come home, which made it a 4-2 Mets lead. In the top of the 7th, Cody Bellinger would hit another double, and later in the inning, Jazz Chisholm drove him in with a double of his own, but Ben Rice could not keep the inning going, and this 4-3 Mets lead would hold all the way until the 9th inning, as the former Yankee Devin Williams came in to try to secure the final 3 outs. He got Trent Grisham to strike out. Aaron Judge put a pretty good swing on the ball, but it was a line drive right to his former teammate Juan Soto, so it all came down to Cody Bellinger, the AL MVP, and Devin Williams won the battle. Cody Bellinger struck out. The New York Mets beat the New York Yankees. The Mets are the MLB champions. They survived against the Dodgers in a crazy first-round matchup. They were able to handle business against the San Francisco Giants at home. They were able to knock off the 1-seed Brewers on the road in the NL Championship game. And finally, they win the Battle of New York here on the West Coast. The New York Mets are the champions.